Hello everyone, welcome to Starscream's Ghost, a Transformers podcast, your episode-by-episode podcast guide through the classic Transformers Generation 1 cartoon and now Japanese anime continuity. I am Jeremy Graves, and joining me on this journey is of course the intrepid traveller, Mr. Andy Hanley. Good sir, in real-time recording point of view, it's been freaking ages since we last spoke, so how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Funnily enough, I feel like this was a really good couple of episodes to come back, having not watched any Headmasters for a while, because I kind of forgotten that I was kind of hyped for this, and it's like, oh, cool, here we go. I mean, I will say I'm disappointed you didn't introduce me as a miracle warrior, but I'll take it.
I mean, that's just a fact by default, mate.
Yeah, that is actually what it says on my business cards, just miracle warrior. Much like Six Shot has ninja consultant on his, mine just says miracle warrior.
Miracle Warrior, Andy Handley.
Miracle Warrior, more often than not, but anyway.
Fair, actually, probably relating to a lot of people in life, in fairness. That's a fair comment. But folks, if you are a first-time listener, thank you very much for giving the podcast a try. We hope you enjoy it. Just to say from the outset, we are covering today episodes 27 and 28 of the Japanese Transformers Headmasters series. So if you're joining us at this point now for the first time, just going to put it out there, there's a heck of a lot to catch up on, but we'll do our best to make sure that you can enjoy this if you are a first-time listener. If you want to check out the archives of the podcast, be it through the audio-only platform of your choice, like Apple Podcasts, Spotify and such, or if you're watching the YouTube video version of this podcast, first of all, hi YouTube, which you can find at youtube.com/Starscream's Ghost Podcast. And in terms of the episodes that we're watching that I mentioned, we are watching the entire series through the UK DVD release by Metrodome circa 2005, which, if you're watching the video version, you can see there behind me. That is the set. Which, Andy, we're going to have some more comments about this DVD set, because this episode, the first episode we're going to talk about already, we've got to talk about quality control once again, unfortunately, but we will get to that. But first of all, Andy, we've sort of alluded to it. Let's do a little general overview. This is a two-parter story. It's actually been a while since we've had an actual named two-parter story. We are talking about the two-part story named Miracle Warriors, the Targetmasters. So, Andy, from your perspective, because I know, as you mentioned on the last podcast that we did, you were very excited when I mentioned Targetmasters. So, overall thoughts, and to give you a question to help you answer it from the outset, did this live up to the hype for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it did. I was sort of intrigued to see what they were going to do, because, the Targetmasters toys were a mix of new original toys and then also, retrofitting existing characters with Targetmasters, like Hot Rod and Cup, etc., which, given that they are on their, Vision Quest or whatever they're doing, I'm like, which angle are they going to take with this? And again, we kind of saw this with, the G1 Rebirth version of the Targetmasters, where they didn't really, I don't think they actually introduced the new Targetmasters at all in that, if I recall. That was all just some of the OG characters that got retrofitted for the storyline there. So I was curious which direction they'd go, or whether they'd have a hybrid of the two. But this one, yeah, we get the all new characters. And I mean, I feel like that's the thing. Whenever you have episodes like this that introduce literally new toys to sell, it's always a kind of is this going to hype me on these characters, on these toys? And I feel like these episodes do. They're I don't know, again, maybe because I'd had a long gap away from watching any of this, that I was just hungry and ready for it. But I'm yeah, you know what? You've made these guys all seem pretty cool. And yeah, we get a lot of kind of interesting stuff here, because we sort of go from, Planet Master being just sort of talked about to actually being an active part of the storyline. We kind of get a bit more sort of Headmasters and Targetmaster kind of backstory, a bit more of just kind of, the robot dudes that control the Headmasters and Targetmasters. And so, yeah, there's quite a lot going on here. And as befitting a two-parter that introduces new characters, this is a really good-looking couple of episodes animation-wise for the most part. It has always has a slightly different animation style, it felt. Again, I was trying to figure out whether this was just because I hadn't watched any for a while, but it kind of felt cooler. There's a lot more kind of shading and dark lines, and everything felt a little bit kind of heavier and a bit more sort of drawn, for want of a better phrase, and it kind of suited it really well. I thought these episodes looked pretty cool for the most part.
Completely agree. There were a few action sequences in particular where you just really notice, man, this looks so good. And that's not to say that Headmasters as a whole has been bad, but it's like you alluded to, it's noticeable when suddenly like the pencils are really, really at work.
Yeah,
is one way to phrase it.
For sure. And I think these also felt like a couple of episodes, and we've never really delved deep enough into like, oh, who are the episode directors for this, because that's not really what we do here. But like these felt like a couple of really well directed episodes as well, because like especially when it comes to sometimes like episodes of anime or whatever can be really smart at taking the boring shots that they don't want to spend a lot of animation time on and just find a way to kind of make them look cool, or just to make them striking so that you can spend all your time on the actual cool stuff, the action sequences. These episodes feel like they're quite smart at that. Like there's a lot of good kind of facial close-ups of characters that you don't necessarily always get in this series, and stuff that's pretty cheap and easy to animate, but it kind of still has an impact and a bit of punch to it. And this felt like it was just really well directed from that perspective.
I've just had a quick glance at the TF Wiki pages. Interestingly, part 1 has 2 directors, and part 2 has a single director that is completely different from part 1.
Yeah. I mean, again, that's pretty much the norm for Japanese animation. Yeah, like even having multiple episode directors. But yeah, that's interesting.
So I will say now, Andy, because I mentioned this on the last podcast, that I have like zero experience, for want of a better phrase, with the Targetmasters like as an entity in Transformers. So don't be surprised if I have lots of random questions for you, which you may or may not be able to answer for all I know. But so don't be surprised if at some random point I have a question going, Andy, tell me about this. And then you just go, this is an anime only thing, Jeremy. Very well. Which I fully expect to be the case in many circumstances.
Yeah, no, I'll be curious to see what your questions are. Because, yeah, the Targetmasters kind of lived in a sort of a weird place, I feel like, in continuity in general. Like, even in the comics, like the G1 comic, I don't remember them getting a whole lot of play. Like, again, it felt like they lent more on the fact that they kind of retooled, like, Hot Rod and Cup and Blur than they did the new characters. Like, I don't remember most of them getting much of a kind of outing in any of the continuities that I followed. So this I think that's part of what made this exciting for me, because it's like I know these characters because I've seen the toys, and I had like, you know, plenty of adverts telling me that I really needed to buy them when I was a kid, and I bought Trigger Happy. I had one of them, one of the Decepticon Targetmasters, and he was pretty cool. But I feel like from a narrative point of view, they didn't really take hold in any of the kind of continuities, interestingly. Which again is sort of intriguing when you look at how big a deal they made of the Headmasters, which, you know, got a lot of kind of a big push in, you know, comics and cartoon, you know, as noted by the fact we could talk about a series called Headmasters, and you know, this sort of, you know, this sort of echoes through here. Like the Targetmasters were always, it was kind of, they'd found the gimmick of like, oh, what if they had little robots, and like what are other things we could do, and that led to like the Targetmasters. And then even like the Power Masters, like you had Power Master Prime, which was kind of like the, you know, the return of Optimus Prime in toy form, basically. So, you know, but yeah, the Targetmasters were just that sort of weird in-betweeny of like, Jesus, this is actually pretty cool. Like, the guys turn into guns. I don't know how that works, but that's kind of cool. But they never got much kind of narrative, you know, play in things.
It'll be interesting to see if Power Masters get any kind of play in this, or should we get that far, to put it in that way, the other Japanese series, because even Power Masters as a concept, I've heard you mention it loads of times. I still don't actually really know what the heck the Power Master is as a concept in Transformers. Yeah. So there's sort of lots of other little permutations of Transformers that are gradually being weaved into this continuity, but it does make me wonder, are they going to touch on any more of them?
Yeah, because I mean, Headmasters and Targetmasters were round about the same time. Like, again, as this series is probably a good kind of chronology of, like, I think the Headmasters came out, and then like about 6 months later or so the Targetmasters came out, which is pretty much where we're at, right? Because we've had like 27 episodes, that's about 6 months of broadcast time. Then suddenly it's like, bang, here's the next wave. I think the Power Masters were a good like year 18 months maybe later. And basically the deal with the Power Masters is like the little guy becomes the engine of the vehicle. So it's like an Optimus Prime, his front grille plate, like Haikyuu, which was his like Power Master dude, like just plugged into the front of him in vehicle mode, and then in robot mode. I can't remember what he did in robot mode. He was just went to McDonald's, I guess. I don't know. And you know, the idea was that rather than being like the brains or the weapons, like they were literally the engine, the power source. Like I think the G1 continuity was basically like the world is running out of energon, so what if we just plug people in us instead? Which is a little bit kind of Soylent Green when you start to think about it. But that was kind of that was the whole thing with Power Masters.
And you know what, before we get onto the episodes, actually, a quick, complete random tangent, but you mentioned the word energon in the entire scope of Transformers, Andy, and this is a big divergent topic, so whether we decide to save this for the end or maybe we just record something separate, I don't know. But since we last recorded a podcast, Transformers comics are back. It's been, it's, I'm trying to figure this out now. It's basically via Image Comics. The Energon universe has been established. There are Transformers comics coming back, which is going to tie in with G.I. Joe. It was stealth launched in a comic called Void Rivals, which was written by Robert Kirkman, famous for The Walking Dead, so some good pedigree there, to say the least. And it's pretty cool to see that Transformers comics are coming back, and this is probably something more to have as an off-air discussion, but at some point, I think it would be really interesting to delve into that once it's properly launched. And at the time we're recording this, folks, it's about 4 or 5 days before San Diego Comic-Con. So depending when we're ultimately able to publish this, chances are, by the time you're hearing this, there will be more news relating to those comics in general. But it's an exciting time to be a comics fan again.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly interesting because, you know, Transformers was in the hands of Dreamwave for a good while, and like, you know, they did some good work, but it did feel like a good time for new eyes to start over fresh with it and see what they do with it. And obviously, yeah, like, you know, Transformers is in a pretty good place with, you know, the live action films continuing to bring in money. So yeah, it was kind of inevitable that they would go back to the comics world too. But yeah, I'm also very keen to see what they do with it and what comes of it all. So it will be interesting indeed.
But that is a discussion for another time. So let's move on to our first actual topic of hand today. Episode 27 of Transformers Headmasters, The Miracle Warriors, The Targetmasters, Part 1. Of which I will say, I don't know if you noticed, Andy, but the voiceover of the title card, it basically did say, I'm obviously going to say this in English, but the way it said the episode title was, The Miracle Warriors, The Targetmasters, Part 1. It was very amusing. I got a nice chuckle out of that.
I love it.
We begin with the narrator saying the following. After a violent battle, the enemy has escaped from Earth. However... Then as we hear the narrator saying this line, we pan across to Fortress Maximus, which is landed on Earth.
And did we not see Jetfire in that panning shot? Like, was I'm pretty sure that was
Now
Jetfire.
You mention it, I don't know. I don't think I noticed that, to be fair.
Yeah, it panned across. I was playing the, like, Spot the Transformer. I'm pretty sure Jetfire was there. Like, and it's like, well... What's he doing these days? Is he just like retired? Was he just going out to get his shopping? Like, what's the deal with Jetfire?
Shall I tell you what he's doing, mate? He's stuck in licensing limbo. That's what he is.
Yeah, he's probably at the Dole office being like, look, they won't let me work anymore. There's a whole Macross thing.
I'm on gardening leave.
Yeah.
Following Scorponok's defeat at the hands of Fortress Maximus that we saw in the last episode, the Decepticons have abandoned Earth, leaving the Autobots to pick up the pieces and eradicate all memory of the villain's presence from the planet. This begins with Fortress tasking the 4 Autobot headmasters with locating and disposing of plasma energy bombs that Scorponok has apparently planted all around various locations of Earth. Now, as a quick refresher, folks, these are the same types of bombs that destroyed not only Cybertron earlier in the season, but also the planet Mars. So is Earth about to be blown up? Let's find out, quite frankly.
Yeah, and it has to be said as we go through this episode, maybe some of the characters here don't treat this with the gravity that it deserves, but we'll get to that. I
think we've already treated it with far more gravity than they did, Andy, just to put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, as a plot point, like, this also feels kind of refreshing as a, like, you know, normally when one side gets defeated or whatever, it's just like, okay, cool, that's done, we move on. And like the idea that we've got to clean up the mess that was left behind, you know, we've got to, of course, they've kind of like basically booby trapped things on the way out. That's kind of a nice, interesting little plot point that a lot of shows would never bother with.
And it's also something that we've seen happen before, so it's nice to see there is also just that consistency with that as well.
Yeah.
Now, we, the viewer, see that Chrome Dome and Hardhead are visiting, I've written down like a frozen climate somewhere on Earth. I don't know where exactly. We'll just say it might be Alaska, because we've seen that a couple of times in the show now.
We'll call it Scotland. It's fine.
Fair, actually. Absolutely fair. And they go to a research station, sort of go underneath it, if you will, and discover some bombs hidden there. We also see elsewhere that Brainstorm and Highbrow are doing the exact same thing, except they won the game of rock, paper, scissors because they got to look at some mines near a beach, quite frankly. So they won that battle. Now, it should be said that the latter pair, Brainstorm and Highbrow, are less than happy with being tasked to do this job. This is further compounded by the former pair, excuse me, so that's being Chrome Dome and Hardhead, and this is compounded further by the fact that as they're climbing down a really, really long ladder, going towards the center of the Earth and such, Hardhead slips and falls, and nearly falls to his death, and Chrome Dome Andy, being the I'll say reliable, though that's a sketchy word at this point with Chrome Dome at the best of times, he just basically dives down faster than Hardhead and just kind of blocks his fall. And I thought, proper team player there.
yeah, it's the classic, the cartoon classic of breaking someone's fall there.
If you wanted your slapstick moment for the episode, folks, that was it.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are other, I'm not sure whether they count as slapstick or not, but there are other moments, perhaps.
Now, in a quick cutaway scene during all of this, the narrator tells us, quote unquote, at the same time, Twincast is on reconnaissance. And then we see that his cassettes are running out of a building of some kind, seemingly having been searching for something, we're assuming Decepticons, but with no luck. Then we get to sort of a bit of a dialogue scene now, which I'm going to attempt to recount, Andy, because I think some of it might be important later on. I say that now thinking that in like 2 episodes' time it's going to be absolutely sod all knowing our luck. But the narrator says, meanwhile, Fortress is trying to organise relief for areas destroyed by the Decepticons. We're now in the command centre of Fortress Maximus. Battleship Maximus, I should say. And this is where the following dialogue happens. We begin with everyone's favourite bad dad, Spike. You want me to lead a relief operation? Fortress responds with, I want you to give the people of Earth hope. My first reaction to that, Andy, is, well, you've picked the right guy, haven't you?
I suppose his options are limited at this point, but still, yes, you are correct.
Further compounding my thought was Daniel saying, cool, I'll help you.
No, I said hope, Daniel.
And then Wheelie adding an interesting wrinkle to the conversation by saying, I'll get my friends to help. Daniel then says, do you have any friends? Of course, I just have to give the word and they'll come, says Wheelie. RC then chimes in and just says, quiet you two. I'd like to help too, Commander. And Fortress then says, I would like you to help with that as well. Spike accepts the assignment. Fortress then ends this section by saying that we're going to demolish the old Decepticon HQ and build something new and useful. Let's remember that, folks, near the end of the season, depending what happens, whether it was ultimately useful or not. But as the dialogue continues, and as mentioned, Spike is accepted, RC, Daniel, and Wheelie are also set to help as well, Fortress also drops a curious tidbit that the Autobots are still searching for the Decepticons, but haven't found any. So really implying they have just completely gone from Earth entirely. Further backing up the fact that the cassette tapes earlier couldn't find anything where they were searching. Also, Spike is told he can use any Autobot units in his coordination with the Earth government for his assignment. I'm also glad to see, Andy, that we now have officially an Earth government at this stage in the series.
Yeah. The conspiracy theorists were right. It's all a global conspiracy to install an Earth government, apparently.
Fortress then contacts Chrome Dome, and the conversation unfolds as follows. Chrome Dome, what's the situation? Chrome Dome responds, we found explosive devices. They're all linked and have tremendous power. So it turns out that there are 5 bombs collectively linked to the heart of a volcano, Andy. And in the process of carefully removing these bombs and trying to place them into a, secure container, if you will, a sort of tremor happens in this volcanic area. This causes the bomb to nearly fall out of Chrome Dome's hand, nearly falling to the ground, and in the process turns on the bomb, activating its countdown timer. Hardhead saying, oh no, the time switch is set. Who will take it? Chrome Dome saying, you're the strongest. Hardhead responding, but you're braver. To deal with the situation as quickly as possible, the pair cross head on, and with some particularly fine animation during this sequence, this is the first really clear instance of it, Andy. They manage to escape from the cave with the explosives as the lava is just following them quite simply. Everything's erupting, it's all going Pete Tong and pear-shaped. There is now a fairly long dialogue scene incoming, but I feel this is important, Andy, because we're now on a sort of a different location, but all these times when we thought Wheelie, he has some quick-witted lines, he has some moments in this show. If you are someone listening to this who perhaps has not enjoyed our roasting of, let's say, Cosmos back in the day, or if you're someone who has thought occasionally we're a little bit harsh on some of the characters in the show, maybe Spike as a father, maybe you think we're being too harsh on him, we're finally getting our moment, Andy, when it comes to Wheelie. And I say finally because it's beautiful. So, we get the following dialogue exchange after we're back on Earth, I should say at this point. Spike and RC are attending a conference at the United Nations in preparation for working with the Earth government and such. But Spike and Daniel are there too, but Spike tells them, please wait and behave yourselves until the meeting is over. Wheelie then starts the conversation with Daniel saying, are we being left behind? Daniel responds with, and I wanted to think up solutions. What a disappointment. My immediate thought being, Daniel, you can't think up solutions to this.
Yeah, I'm gonna say if I was asked for like descriptions of Daniel, like solution driven would maybe not be one of them.
Wheelie just kind of responds with, yeah. And Daniel says, your friends have come. And then Wheelie says, I did call them. Sorry, also, I think I misread that. I think it said, are your friends coming, was kind of the question Daniel implied. Wheelie then saying, I did call them. Daniel then further, just like poking the bear, if you will, saying, Wheelie, you don't have friends, do you? Be honest. I do. I'm telling you. Why didn't they come then? Shut up. They'll turn up. Then a few moments pass. And then, they're here. Look, over here. And at this point, 3 Autobots who we have never seen before are flying in the sky. Collectively later on in this story, we will come to know them as the Targetmasters, but at this point, we simply know them as Point Blank, Sure Shot, and Crosshairs. I've got to say, Andy, excellent Transformer names.
Yep, especially for Targetmasters, and yeah, it's certainly better than Wheelie's friends 1, 2, and 3 as well.
So they land in front of the two youths is probably the easy way to sum that up. Now, the dialogue continues with the following. Sure Shot says, I've got to think of a voice now to represent Sure Shot. There's probably going to be a lot of crossover of voices, folks. It's been a while since we've recorded, so I'll just go with, it's been quite a while since we've seen you, eh? Wheelie responds with, and also kind of embarrassed by the look of it, sort of says, yeah, it's... Daniel then chimes in, wow, Wheelie, what cool friends! And Sure Shot, responds with, friends? Wheelie then says, well, maybe you would like to be friends with Daniel. And then Daniel starts going, what are you saying? Introduce me. Actually, Daniel, these people... And then Sure Shot just chimes in and says, never mind, Wheelie. We'd like to meet the Autobot commander. Daniel then says, I'll show you to Commander Fortress. Please follow me. And he walks off screen. And then Sure Shot crouches down towards Wheelie and in a much lower toned voice just says, did you tell the kid we were friends? And then Wheelie responds with, no way, I had no idea my superiors would come to Earth. And the scene ends. There is a lot to unpack here, Andy, but Wheelie got found out here in a big way.
Yeah, very, very enjoyable. Like sometimes some of the kind of slapstick Daniel and Wheelie stuff can be a little bit tiresome, but this was actually genuinely pretty good. So, especially as a way of introducing these characters, because it just kind of it gave them something to work with right from the off. So yeah, I'm definitely here for it.
Another detail, which now that we've both watched the 2 episodes of this story, it's not elaborated on anymore, so I wonder if it is going to come up at some point, but Wheelie mentions specifically that they are his superiors. So I wonder if there's like more backstory there that we're going to get sort of a follow-up on, because that seems to be a fairly significant way of phrasing that, unless that's just a mistranslation.
Yeah, it's also a curiosity, because again, this is one of those weird sort of like movie versus Headmasters thing of like, you know, Wheelie's origins and how he ended up, you know, falling in with the Autobots, because that's sort of a story that we don't really know in terms of this continuity and how it's all worked out and how we might know the Targetmasters and etc. So back at Autobot City, Fortress attempts to figure out how to deal with the looming detonation of the bombs that Chrome Dome and Hardhead have discovered, but finds that there will be no time to defuse them. And just then, Wheelie and Daniel arrive with their new comrades, we assume at this point, Point Blank, Sure Shot and Crosshair. And apparently, these 3 are famous amongst Autobots for their expertise in battle throughout the universe, Andy. Not just locally, the universe. So these guys must be good. Yeah, and it's why we've heard their names so many times before this episode, right? It's not that they've just magically turned up and suddenly we're like, oh yeah, those world famous guys that have never been mentioned at all up to this moment. And then Point Blank makes it clear, quote unquote, it is our dream to save the Earth. We want to demonstrate our power. But also cautions Fortress that Earth will never truly be safe until the Decepticons are totally wiped out. Also implying, which Fortress picks up on, that they need to be more prepared for whatever the Decepticons have coming their way next. Which, you know what, Andy? I'm glad someone's finally pointing this out, because we've pointed out for how many episodes that they were on the back foot for too long, and then the one time they did try to be on the upper hand, it nearly frickin' backfired in their face to a massive degree. Yeah, and I mean, this is the first time in the series where it feels like they've kind of got a foothold, so yeah, again, it's sort of, you know, an interesting cadence to this series to have these characters introduced now, and, you know, it kind of shakes things up a little bit. But Fortress makes it clear that he has more pressing concerns to attend to, like, you know, a bunch of bombs about to explode. So Maximus takes off. During all of this, there's a quick transition scene involving Wheelie and Daniel talking. Wheelie explains that the new comrades, which for the sake of just discussion, Andy, I'll just call them the Targetmasters, but just to be clear, folks, they're not Targetmasters yet, as it were, just to kind of be clear. But he discusses that he heard that they have felled hundreds of Decepticons, which prompts a flashback sequence, which I think that the polite way to sum this up, Andy, is they utterly mullered a bunch of Decepticons through hand-to-hand combat, through gunfire. They just utterly owned Decepticons, and I don't think we've ever seen footage of Autobots being this dominant in battle before. Yeah, it definitely feels like one of those, like, the animation staff probably had fun with this, because it's like, now you can just go for it. This doesn't have to be a, you know, a close run thing. Just make them look really good. And then Daniel adds to this,
this conversation by going, "Amazing! How come you've got such strong warriors as friends?" Wheelie responds with, "What?" Daniel then says, "Didn't you call them?" And Wheelie responds with, "They used to look after me." Which is further like a little interesting tidbit of, okay, so they're your superiors, but also they looked after you. Like, were you just a lost Transformer and you just hung around? Were you basically the Daniel of their group? Yeah, is what I'm getting at.
Or were the Targetmasters like professional babysitters before they became like the most feared Autobots in the West or whatever they are?
Oh, we'll discuss them being professionals later, Andy, because they have some cracking dialogue later regarding them being professionals. Now, during the upcoming scene that we're about to recap, in fact, actually, I've jumped ahead, sorry. So Chrome Dome and Hardhead are still trying to escape the volcanic caverns, only to find now that they are trapped inside by a rock slide. At this point as well, we see that Highbrow and Brainstorm are in a similar situation, but Twincast was nearby to lend them a hand. Battleship Maximus arrives in Alaska/Scotland to help dig Chrome Dome and Hardhead out, and they bring out the plasma bombs and put them on board the ship. So, the plan being at this point, to fly them out into space, to allow them to harmlessly detonate them just into a vacuum of space, as it were. Honestly, Andy, seems like a very logical plan, but we're then told time is ticking fast, implying there's a countdown timer. And
somebody should probably have mentioned this earlier in this whole imbroglio.
Yeah, which then leads Daniel to ask the obvious question: Chrome Dome, can't you find out the time it's set for? Highbrow's response to this, I thought, was not only incredibly direct and blunt, but also just very not helpful, in that he just said, "If we fail, we'll be blown up."
It's like, you don't say.
And then Chrome Dome then says, "If only I'd looked at it then." Implying they don't know how much time there is left on these bombs, and they have no way of being able to find them. Or to find out the information, I should say. Which begs the question, Andy. What's the way to phrase this? They were putting the bombs into cases that they brought with them. Are these just like one-time lock cases or something? Like, what's happened? Is it a combination lock? Did they forget the code?
Yeah, I'm not too sure. Like, maybe it's just like the bomb has a timer but not a readout of when it's set to detonate, which would make sense. But then I'm trying to think. Like, I feel like when we've seen these bombs in the past that they had some kind of readout on them. But yeah, I don't know what's going on here, but either way, none of this feels like... Maybe they should have called in some actual bomb disposal people and not just the headmasters, because they don't seem very good at this job.
Yeah, and don't forget, when Cybertron blew up, they were literally trying to pull the bombs off of Vector Sigma before the timer ended.
Yeah, I mean, they're what, like 0 for 2 on, like, planets saved when bombs have been planted, so not really a safe pair of hands at this point. Now,
during the upcoming scene we're about to recap, I just want to make a quick mention of that there is a cutaway scene where there's a follow-up to the whole Earth government thing, where Spike is busy leading the Protector bots, the Technobots, and ultimately the Train bots in destroying an abandoned Decepticon Earth base headquarters. There is a fun quote from Spike in this scene of, "This is definitely an eyesore in a peaceful world. The first step in reconstruction is to destroy what evil has built." Good quote. That said, Andy, I feel this show is gradually just eradicating classic G1. I mean, I say gradually, it's done a pretty good job of it so far, with the amount of killing and, like, the space bridge being done and whatnot, and, you know, Mars and Cybertron being gone. But at this point, I swear this Decepticon base has been there since, like, season 1. Was this one of the bases they built in, like, a scene?
Probably, yeah. I mean, they have so many bases. I mean, it's probably a full-time job just finding and destroying them all, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, this was maybe, like one of their first bases. I don't know. It's, sad times in a weird sort of way.
Back to the whole Maximus and bomb stuff. So Battleship Maximus is racing in space to get to a safe distance, Point Blank and co. are offering to fly ahead to make sure there's no danger ahead of them and such like that. But then, in this process, this is our first element of tension between the new Autobot Targetmasters, who aren't Targetmasters yet, and the Headmasters, because Point Blank sort of just throws a little, let's just say, insult towards the Headmasters by saying, "Don't worry, we're faster and stronger than normal Transformers," which prompts a reaction from Chrome Dome which has a little reaction from Chrome Dome, kind of like a, huh? And then what can only be described, Andy, as just a death glare by one of the Targetmasters, as it were. Just from sure shot, just an utter death glare, like you sort of see in anime and all cartoons and stuff. You're like, oh, okay, he means that.
yeah, and this is not an isolated incident. Like, this is definitely setting the tone for like how these two groups interact with each other for most of this story.
Fortress refuses the request, however, for them to fly on ahead. Soon they reach the safe zone, if you will, and they're about to release the explosives into space when suddenly a small craft appears on their radar and it's broadcasting an SOS signal. Eventually they are able to see who is on board. And one of the Headmasters says, "Wait, I've seen that face before." Fortress responds with, "This is Maximus. Do you understand me?" And unfortunately, though the Headmasters and co. could see who was on board, there was no sound coming through on the transmission. Twincast then comes running in and says, "Leave it to the Autobot cassettes to interpret," and proceeds to open his chest, begin playing, quote-unquote, one of the tapes on his chest, and is able to basically lip read, though they don't have lips, Andy, I guess, at this point, what they're saying. So fair play to Twincast for being incredibly useful at this point, which the crux of it is they need assistance.
Yeah. No, Twincast does some solid work in this episode. Like, he's kind of like the quiet MVP of this two-parter, because he gets things done. It has to be said.
But the other crucial detail, Andy, that Twincast reveals is that this little ship needs assistance, and also they escaped Planet Master, which, of course, as we've learned from earlier in the series, is where the Headmasters essentially were holed up for millions of years while the battle for Cybertron and such was going on. Suddenly, it becomes apparent that this ship is also being attacked by the Decepticons. Now, despite the tight timeline, we still don't know what it is, of the bombs that are going to detonate at any given moment, Fortress now decides the priority is to save that ship. Which is going to be really bad, Andy, if their ship were to explode because they didn't get rid of the bombs sooner. But a debate for another day, perhaps. We then see the soon-to-be Targetmasters on the hull of Maximus getting ready to leap into battle when Sure Shot says, "It's them, the Decepticon warriors." We are then introduced to another new trio of characters. This time, this time, who will soon become Decepticon Targetmasters. With the names, Andy, of Misfire, Trigger Happy, and I think my personal favourite, Slug Slinger. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What a great name.
Very good. Also, not to be taken literally. That's not what he does. He doesn't just like pick things off of leaves and throw them at people. Like, it's in the military weaponry shell sense.
We're talking like Metal Slug, as it were.
Yes, exactly. Not Garden Slug, because that would be an entirely different Autobot, Decepticon entirely.
And Slug Slinger then kind of says, "It's point blank. I'll get you. Transform!" And also, the voice of Slug Slinger is a little bit weird as well. It's kind of like a higher pitch tone with a weird filter over it. I almost kind of said something like a Vocaloid, but then I thought, no, it's not that bad, as it were. Or not that enhanced, I should say.
Yeah.
But now, harkening back to what I wrote down, Andy, as proper classic G1 Transformers, the Decepticon, soon-to-be Targetmasters, are jets, whereas the Autobot, soon-to-be Targetmasters, are vehicles. So we're getting some proper old-school feeling action here, and at this point, I'm just like, you know what? These guys are going to become Targetmasters. I'm totally fine with them as is right now. Can we just leave it like this? I'm well into this.
Yeah, for sure.
As this is unfolding, The filing, that's not the word. The following dialogue happens inside Maximus's bridge. Chrome Dome says, "They're awful, those three," referring to the soon-to-be Targetmasters. Hardhead says, "Yeah, just showing up like that." Brainstorm adds, "Look, Six Shot's here." Chrome Dome says, "Let's show them what we're made of." And Highbrow says they won't get away with this. So clearly eager to prove themselves to the soon-to-be Targetmaster team. And also to help with the Master Refugee ship, it should be said. The Headmasters spring into action to take on Six Shot. Interestingly, well, hang on, double back for a sec. During the battle that's about to ensue, the refugee ship is brought on board Battleship Maximus, and we get to see some of them walk out of the ship and such, Andy. And I don't know if you noticed, but one of them blatantly looked like Powerglide.
I mean, again, we asked this about Jetfire earlier on, like, what's he doing these days? I guess the same could be asked of Powerglide. Like, what's he up to these days? Like, maybe he's happily married to that girl from The Girl He Loved, Powerglide. And,
I was about to say the exact same thing.
Just hanging out.
Now, these refugees, which I should say, folks, they don't actually give these characters names in this little story, so I don't really know how to refer to them in the context, but for now, I'm going to refer to them as, like, the Master Refugees, which in itself sounds very weird, but just please roll with that as a phrase. But the dialogue that the Master Refugees say, Andy, I've written it down almost being similar to something like Simlish from the Sims games. It's very, very weird, but they don't actually talk. And Twincast has to continue his translation duties. But we find out, through this translation, that Planet Master has been raided by a giant battleship, quote unquote. And everyone immediately just assumes it's Scorponok and just basically goes, "So that's where he went. There you go. Now we know where he is."
You'd have thought that, like, on the places they might have checked, like, you know, his home planet might have been one of them. Especially given that, like, you know, the other locations available is, like, Cybertron's been blown up. Like, I guess Chara's still around, but that's not, like, the most, you know, upmarket place to go and hide. It's like, you know, where else could there be? Maybe the home planet of Scorponok / Zarak? Maybe, just.
So like someone just suddenly shouting, "Gagzooks, we should have thought of that."
Yeah. Like, you'd at least send a text back home to be like, "Is there any weird massive battleships just hanging out on your planet these days?"
So, anything weird going on at home? On the text message.
Yeah, just drop me a line, drop me a WhatsApp.
At this point, we now get a new insert song, so we know something big is about to happen, because that's what that means, everybody. No, there were no subtitles for them. I was disappointed. Maybe the TF Wiki will tell us soon. Who knows? But then the Headmasters, the Autobot, I should say, Headmasters, confront Six Shot, and even Fortress goes into battle with them. Now, we're not talking like Fortress Maximus, we're talking Fortress, who, like, is always on the bridge, like, trying to fix things or trying to conjure up enough energy to become Fortress Maximus. Is this the first actual battle, Andy, that just, for want of a better phrase, plain old Fortress has been involved in?
I mean, maybe not the first outright, but it's the first in a very long time. Like, I feel like maybe early series he had a couple of skirmishes in that form, but yeah, we've not seen him. He's been busy, like, being a manager most of the time, so yeah, he's not really or Daniel / Wheelie carer. So yeah, we've not really seen him, like, in action in that form in a good while.
Now, Fortress, the main reason he's come out into the battle is so that he can just basically make it clear to Six Shot, "I know you're on Planet Master. I know what you're doing. I know your dastardly deed." And Six Shot is basically just going, "Oh, those refugees spilled the beans." It's pretty much how he reacted to it. Now, while they are all dealing with Six Shot, the Master Refugees are trying to do their part to help, given they've been helped, by bringing the explosives on board the aircraft, Andy, to fly them out into space, seemingly just to commit suicide and blow up, is how I took that. But an interesting note here, Andy, which kind of goes against everything that's happened in the story so far. Because as they're carrying the bombs onto the ship, there's a close-up of one of the bombs sitting on this pallet that they're carrying. And we can see the timer. Says there's 2 minutes to go.
If only there was a way we could tell what the timer was set for. There's just some random numbers that are always getting lower.
I did have a hearty laugh at this and just went, of course. It's basically Chrome Dome being inept. That's why they don't know.
Yeah, as it turns out.
It also becomes apparent at this point that though the refugees can't speak the same language as the Autobots, they do understand everything the Autobots are saying. In a fun moment now during the battle that's going on outside the ship, we get a new formation established, Andy, which I'm going to guess is probably a one-time thing by the Autobot Headmasters, but it also probably indicates that the animation team of this episode were really big sports fans, because rather than getting the head formation of friendship to just like mull a six shot, they just form a rugby scrum and literally shout scrum and attack him.
The head formation of rugby. Love it.
So that's a fun little moment. Slugslinger makes for the ship that's flying away, the refugee ship that's carrying the bombs, as it were. But suddenly, he's tackled by one of these soon-to-be Targetmasters. And then the bombs just go off, bathing Slugslinger, Sure Shot, Point Blank, and their teammates in just a wave of plasma energy. And we just see this bright light happening, and the narrator suddenly says, "The close proximity of Battleship Maximus puts it in a precarious position. What will be the fate of the Transformers?" And the episode ends, and that's the end of part 1. Gotta say, Andy, for a part 1, a lot of stuff being established here, a lot of it was given good time for it to really sink in what each of these guys were like, kind of how cool they are, quite frankly, kind of the different reactions of people. There was a lot to take in this episode, but I thought this was a really, really good episode overall.
Yeah, it's definitely very solid. Like, you know, as mentioned, it looks really nice. Yeah, like it does a good job of. It's kind of interesting how it sells you on the characters before it sells you on their gimmick, like that they don't, you know, even have at this point. Because, you know, that was always the G1 thing. Like, I mean, I guess the Rebirth took its time a little bit, but, you know, quite often with this stuff, it gets straight to the point. It doesn't want to spend too long kind of just luxuriating over the characters because it wants to show you the cool thing that they do. Like Six Shot, who always has to show off all 6 of his modes somehow.
Gotta sell a toy.
Exactly. So yeah, the kind of slower build is quite refreshing there. Like the characters are good enough that they can stand alone without having to be like Targetmasters from the get-go. And yeah, like from a narrative point of view, just getting Planet Master involved with this just ups the stakes in a really different and interesting way to, you know, anything that we've sort of seen previously from this show. So it's a pretty juicy kind of, you know, morsel to dangle in front of you, because this is high stakes stuff for the main cast of this show, and will only become more so as we get into episode 2.
Indeed, but before we get to episode 2, actually, Andy, I'll give you the choice. Would you like to dive into the TF Wiki now, or do you want to do both episodes at the end?
Yeah, let's TF Wiki what we've seen thus far.
So, TF Wiki notes for this episode 1 of this 2-part story. Bear with me a second, the page has decided to reload. There we go. So, continuity notes. Scorponok and the other Decepticons have fled Earth in between his defeat at the end of the previous episode and the beginning of this one. I'm glad we've had that firmly established. Continuity errors. For some unfathomable reason, the Master Refugees only speak in unintelligible mini-con style beeps and whistles in this, and all subsequent episodes. Apparently they're required Twincast to translate for them here. But when they become Targetmasters, mini spoiler, their partners are able to understand them. This is totally an unexplained trait and is limited purely to these 6 Master natives, with none of the Headmasters having this problem, nor any of the robots from Master that we have met or will meet later in the show.
Yeah, I do find that very confusing. And again, I guess it's not completely a missed opportunity, but again, that's kind of the whole thing with the, you know, Headmasters, Targetmasters, whatever, is like the symbiotic relationship between robot and smaller robot, or whatever. You know, it's and yeah, so it's sort of it's a strange decision. Like maybe they just couldn't find any like good voice actors for those parts, so we're just like, let's just have some random unintelligible stuff and we'll just have somebody translate instead.
Trivia notes. Oh wow, this actually confirms one of my fears. The soon-to-be Targetmaster partners are never to be referred to by name in the Headmasters series.
Yeah. I mean, it's again another really interesting decision because, you know, like the toys and the canon and the lore that went with them named all of the, you know, pilot / gun / heads of all of these characters. So yeah, it continues to I find it fascinating that was it's one of those things, like if you could do some like sort of behind the scenes documentary, like talking to the creators of this show, that would be my question number one of like what was the decision there, because I'd imagine like that's either like a very Japanese sales technique for these things where they just wanted to focus on the single name of the main characters, or whether this was a specific thing for the narrative of the show that they just didn't want to go that route, or they didn't get the information at the time it came out that like, oh no, we're naming all the, you know, all the accoutrements as well. But yeah, it's really interesting.
I suppose as well, like thinking of it from, like you sort of alluded to it, but kind of almost like from a marketing standpoint, it's kind of 6 names versus 12 names at that point then, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a lot cleaner to just be like, yeah, this is the toy that you're buying. But like it's always sort of interesting because all the other chronologies were all very, you know, really got into the weeds in a lot of occasions on like, you know, the difference. Because especially with the Headmasters, that was the whole point of just like, you know, there's that personality gap between, you know, the head and the body effectively. And, you know, there's a very deliberate kind of thing that went on there. And all of that sort of gets parked and sidelined here.
Appearing in an establishing crowd scene alongside Skyfire is Ironhide.
I thought, yeah, I mean, not dead in this continuity. I guess that's nice to know.
Well, yeah, that's the thing as well, because they also mention here who died in Transformers the movie, but obviously, as we've talked about before, in this continuity, the movie hasn't happened.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, poor old Ironhide knows not what is to come.
And also appearing in a crowd scene is a blue and white Optimus Prime.
Okay, I mean, yeah.
Which is that not just Ultra Magnus at that point?
I guess say, yeah, that's just Ultra Magnus is like in a camp, is just like also on vacation here.
So, this is the 3rd episode of the Headmasters to feature an insert song. It features the debut of Destron Sanka, and also features a reprise of one insert song previously used in the series, Tate Ikari no Headmasters. These 2 songs are the only ones used in the series.
And very good they are too.
So, do you want to know what the lyrics for Destron Sanka are?
I mean, yeah, I feel like they'll be very important to our understanding. So.
And right, okay. So, I'm not going to attempt to sing it because I don't remember how the song goes, but the translation of the lyrics are: power, power, power. Might makes right. Fight, fight, fight. We only live for war. If people shed tears, we Destrons, Decepticons, shed only blood. We will fill the map of space with the colour of our might. Oh, Destrons! Oh, Destrons! The princes of evil, the Destrons! Then we sort of get a little bit of a variation on the first verse. Power, power, power! Crush and destroy everything! Fight, fight, fight! We have no use for the weak. If people's hearts are aflame, Destron blood is ice. That's a great line. No matter how far they flee, we'll hunt down our enemies. Oh, Destrons! Oh, Destrons! The ones who laugh in the end are the Destrons. If people shed tears, we Destrons shed only blood. We will fill the map of space with the colour of our might. Then you get the repeating element now. You get, oh, Destrons, the princes of evil, the Destrons. Oh, Destrons, the ones who laugh in the end are the Destrons. That basically repeats again for a few more times. But honestly, as far as lyrics go, that's not too bad. I like that.
Yeah, it's good peppy, upbeat pop song. I like it.
So, back to the proper TF Wiki notes, as it were. Now, I think I might be getting my names confused, because this note is referring to Point Blank, but I'm sure it's Sure Shot. Am I getting my names confused here of Targetmasters? So I'm going to read this verbatim, though I think they might actually be talking about Sure Shot. So it might be a little typo, or it might be me just getting my new soon-to-be Targetmasters mixed up. Point Blank's rather dismissive attitude towards Wheelie, for which he can't really be blamed, is the start of a trend of him being something of a dick to most of the other Autobots. Why? Because as we'll find out in the next episode, Andy, and no doubt we'll talk about this phrase, he's a professional soldier.
Yes, he is.
The next note here, couldn't the Autobots have destroyed the Decepticons' base this easily much earlier?
I mean, to be fair, it is a lot easier to destroy a building when there's nobody defending it, so I will at least give them that.
As the future Targetmasters fly to meet Wheelie, the Chrysler building can be seen in the background. This is surprisingly geographically accurate, assuming they're coming down First Avenue because they're right by the UN building.
Yeah, well, clearly somebody got some reference photos for the UN building stuff and was just like, yeah, there we go, got to make this accurate.
As Fortress works on the problem of the bombs, his screen displays what appears to be technical information for a computer processor, but possibly generated by CP/M operating systems.
Yeah, it did look like there was some programming language stuff in there that I always enjoy the like random text readouts on these things to be like, what are they actually? I mean, at least it's not like the Adobe like terms and conditions that like a Gundam series had in it once or something. So I give them that.
Or basic or something,
Yeah.
Interesting note here. According to the booklet included with the Pioneer DVD release of the series, the last part of this episode that we've just talked about was interrupted by a special news report on its original broadcast in Japan.
Oh, okay. I guess probably an earthquake warning or something. As quite often disrupts broadcasts there if there's any kind of earthquake warning.
Now we get on to foreign localization. First of all, the episode title. In English, the Omni Productions dub simply was The Miracle Warriors Part 1. The Shout Factory US DVD release was The Miracle Warriors, The Targetmasters Part 1. Additional notes here, Andy. Highbrow utters, "Thank the Allspark, they failed," in response to the Decepticon bomb plot failing, in the first ever name dropping of the Allspark in G1 media.
Yeah, that's intriguing.
Still, Twincast refers to his mini cassettes as deployers. And the pit is referred to again. Which, as we've talked about before, is kind of like the reference to hell and stuff.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So I'm going to give you the choice, Andy. You've got Mandarin, Italian, or Spanish. Which would you like to hear first when it comes to the name of the episode?
I'm feeling like the Spanish are going to have a good one for this.
So, there may be some information missing on this, but the Spanish title is, and I'm going to probably butcher this, so I apologize, folks, Los Guerreros Milagrosos, which apparently translates simply to America.
I mean...
I'm going by the TF Wiki here, folks. If it's wrong, tell them, not me.
Yeah, that feels like there's definitely something missing there. That also doesn't sound like how they say America in Spanish, but cool. let's just say, yeah, this was just called America.
In Mandarin, it translates to Brave Warriors Come, Targetmasters Part 1. And in Italian, they go to whole hog, Andy, here. It's simply Soldiers of the Apocalypse, Targetmasters Part 1.
There you go. I mean, that's maybe over-egging it a little bit, but that's a very good title.
And that concludes Part 1 of this two-parter, Andy. So, any additional notes that you had before we move on to Part 2?
No, I don't think so. I think I was still trying to figure out why the Targetmasters talk like that at this point, because it was confusing me. But no, it was a good episode. A weirdly kind of abrupt sort of cliffhanger, but it kind of works. So and again, especially when you don't have to wait a week for Part 2 or whatever, like we can just barrel straight through to it.
Exactly, and it is interesting. Like with the cliffhanger, we've not really touched on that in great detail until you just mentioned it now, but as far as cliffhangers go, it doesn't feel like the episode is about to end when it does, but where it does end, it's such a natural cliffhanger point. And I do give another, like, extra, like, you know, gold star, I guess, to the episode, because you're sort of so into the story at that point, you sort of lose track of time. And it's like one of those proper TV moments where you're just like, no, I don't want to wait till next week. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, there was definitely a point where, yeah, like I definitely lost track of time, and I thought this was like a sort of mid-episode, oh, this is where they cut to a break and then we'll carry on. And it's like, oh no, actually, we're rolling credits. This is it. We're done until the next one.
It's like, how many TV shows have you got to, like, the end of the episode and you're like, I can't wait a week for the next one? Be it regular TV or anime, you know. How many cliffhangers have we seen in anime, Andy? Like, I'm just, like, you know, Gundam Witch from Mercury, a good example. Heck, Ald Noah Zero back in the day is another example. You know, some of those cliffhangers were brutal.
Yeah. I mean, that like, Ald Noah Zero, to go anime for a second, was like the king of cliffhangers. Like, it knew how to drop one every single week. And yeah, like, some shows just know how to do that stuff and make it stick.
But with that being said, it is time to move on to episode 28, The Miracle Warriors, Targetmasters, Part 2. We do get a little bit of a recap at the start of the episode, which, just for the sake of continuity here, the narrator says the following as there is footage playing behind the voice. Fortress has taken the Decepticon bombs to dispose of them in space, but Sixshot has appeared with the new Decepticon recruit Slugslinger. But then, the plasma explosive detonates. Which, as far as recaps go, Andy, succinct. It kind of tells you not everything you need to know, but it tells you the bare minimum essential, I guess.
Yeah. We should probably mention something about Wheelie having no friends, but yeah, it mostly does the job.
So we begin with the light from the plasma energy bomb having detonated, just brightening the entire region of space nearby. There, you get that classic view of just the light bouncing off every transformer and being and ship nearby. And as the explosion dims, the headmasters see that these soon-to-be target masters are just unconscious. And so they pull them back inside Battleship Maximus. And they notice something odd as they're pulling their, we guess, comrades at this point to safety, that their hands have got sort of new guns or hand cannons just sort of fused to their wrists, and they can't sort of remove them. But where did they come from? Because they didn't have them before. Inside Maximus, Fortress explains that, quote-unquote, exposure to plasma energy caused it, the weapon in this case, to stick. It has to be removed on Earth. So cue us to quickly go back to Earth where repairs and such are done. The narrator telling us, the viewer specifically, quote-unquote, Battleship Maximus arrives at Autobot HQ on Earth in time for an overhaul. Point Blank and his wounded warriors receive treatment and convalesce. Now, what we also get to see here at this point, Andy, is I think for the second time in the series, we get to see Autobots utilising the quite clearly very popular Autobot HQ gymnasium facilities, which I can't even say, and I ruined my own joke there. So, but they got to use the gymnasium facilities, the treadmill, they lifting some weights with one hand. This is proper workout material here, Andy.
Yeah. Do you think they charge a subscription for it? Or do you reckon, like, it's free if you're an employee? Like, you know, I wonder if it's one of those, like, now you got to pay your monthly fee, like, to get into the Autobot gym.
Well, as we've alluded to, I think when you're a professional soldier, I think you get him for free.
yeah, I would imagine. Who's going to stop him, really?
This is where things begin to develop in a way I did not expect. Especially speaking as someone who is completely unfamiliar with the Targetmasters. The weapons are still stuck to the wrists of the soon-to-be-named Targetmasters, but then we get a close-up of one of them, and it begins making sounds similar to the language of the refugees that we saw in the previous episode, like the Simlish language. And Chrome Dome then just nonchalantly says, oh, they're from Planet Master. And Sure Shot just responds with, the three of them. They're worried about their three missing friends. And this is how we find out, Andy, that these randomly new weapons fused to their arms are in fact three of the refugees that took the bombs that were detonated into space and are now just stuck in weapon form on each of their hands. What?
Yeah, I wish I had answers for you, but yeah, that was also my response of like, there's a lot to unpack here, like especially if you were like said now like target master weapons, you're just a refugee like hanging out in a ship, and now you're a gun, and this sounds like the start of a Japanese light novel. It's just like, I was a refugee on a spaceship, and now I'm a gun that's attached to a robot's arm. It's like, oh, sounds kind of nightmarish when you think about it. It's a little bit like Cronenberg-esque.
Made even worse by the TF Wiki note that we just read for the notes on part 1, in that these the Simlish refugees, if you will, we don't know their names.
Yeah.
So it's just going to be, hey, you, fire!
Yeah, just very, very random. I mean, also like kind of an interesting sort of wrinkle again on the sort of, we've seen things like, I commented when we sort of first saw like Scorponok in his robot mode that they very closely mimicked like the look of the toy in terms of like the visor that he has, and in a way that other bits of G1 continuity didn't, because they thought we could make him look better as a kind of a character. Yet here, like, the Target Masters don't work like that. Like, they are just normal guns that the characters hold. As far as I recall, none of them were kind of like attachments per se. So it's sort of also an interesting sort of deviation from the actual toys, which maybe was a design thing that changed at some point. But like these are not like the toys in terms of how the actual gun attachments work.
Also, quick note, folks, because we sort of, depending how if it made it in the edit or not, I think I may have got my name slightly confused on this. So the one who is kind of leading the charge when it comes to these soon-to-be Target Masters is Point Blank, but I realise I've been saying Sure Shot for quite a lot of this. I've just kind of managed to finally figure this out based on looking up some stuff in between talking. So, yes, it is Point Blank that is the main dude of the soon-to-be Target Masters, not Sure Shot. So, not only have I now confused myself forevermore, having said it so much and written it down in my notes, but hopefully I've not confused you too much, folks. So, please just, replace as needed. But from this point forward, it is Point Blank who is the leader of this trio.
Right.
There we go. Apologies for the confusion, but I figured if I say it now, it's far easier to then retcon myself later. Continuing where we got to. The conversation then continues in that Chrome Dome says, "Do you understand their language?" And Point Blank says, "It's telepathy. Are you compatible with them?"
This is just the answer to every problem in this series, isn't it? It's like, I don't know, telepathy. Like, how do we fix this problem? Something telepathy. I'm
sure I've told this story before, but there's a really fun gag on a Simpsons episode where they're at like a Comic-Con, and there's Lucy Lawless, who was Xena in the Xena Warrior Princess show, and they're doing like a Q&A, and you get like the ultra nerds, if you will, kind of asking a question of like, in this scene, you were riding atop this kind of horse, but in the next scene, you were riding a different horse. How do you explain it? And then Lucy Lawless just says, well, in a circumstance like that, a wizard did it.
yeah, exactly. Telepathy is the wizard here, absolutely.
I do hope we're just going to keep getting random mentions of telepathy, because it's great.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just hoping this isn't going to be like the end of the entire series. It's like, how are we going to defeat Scorpion? I know, telepathy. There you go. Job done. Let's go home.
And in response, I should say, to the question that Point Blank has asked Fortress of, are you compatible with them? Which I don't understand what that means in this context.
Yeah, like, are you running Windows 98? You need a different version of Windows to be able to install these nameless gun people.
Fortress just goes, nodding his head. And then
I mean, that's also like, that's like asking your parents if something they bought is compatible with the other thing that they bought, and they don't have any idea what you've said, and it's like
and then he adds to this, oh, the wonders of the miracle Target Masters, the new Transformers. And that's how they're named Target Masters, folks. It's like some grandiose entrance for it. They're just offhandedly called that now.
Yeah, I mean, pretty good on the fly name, to be fair. Like, I'll give them credit. Like, you didn't just call them the gun things, so
So, we've now discovered that 3 of the refugees, and just sort of recapping here slightly, folks. So we've now discovered that 3 of the refugees have effectively made 3 Transformers Target Masters by becoming their weapons. So keep up with that. And this has happened because of all the plasma energy that was released and they were fused to them for a little bit. But they have now been removed at this point in the scene. So we can see sort of little other robots darting about. In fact, I think one of them is actually sitting on Point Blank's shoulder. I assume it's his handgun or his buddy, Andy. I'm going to call him that.
Yeah.
Point Blank's buddy. A Targetmaster buddy. There you go. That's why I'm going to adopt it in our recaps in this show, because I think that's the only way I'm going to be able to talk about this now.
Yeah, no, let's go with that.
So they've all been like physically separated and whatnot. Fortress has dubbed them the Targetmasters and such. But then, the next scene, Andy, we get our latest edition of Parenting with Spike. With the following scene involving Daniel, Spike, and Carly that unfolds as follows. Daniel starting with, "Dad, please, I want to go to Planet Master." Spike saying, I can't keep asking Fortress for favours, Daniel. Carly then says, "Right, stay behind. I'll feel more at ease." Which my reaction to that, Andy, was, good for you, Carly, for once actually say, can we think about me here for a second? You guys keep doing all your BS. For once, can we just be a family?
Yeah, just the actual proper mum response of like, no, you can't go to the dangerous planet where like you're probably going to die. You should stay in the safe place where I can keep an eye on you. It's like, yes, this is actual like this is like those sort of like educational videos where this would be like where a big tick appears on the screen of just like ding, good parenting.
But then Daniel says, "I want to experience things," which my immediate thought was, Daniel, how many Transformers? It's like killer plants, Transformers dying, coming back to life as a zombie, dying again in front of you. How much more do you want to see? You know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for life experience, but I think, buddy, you need to slow down.
And this is the point where Spike has a decision to make as a father. He either sides with his loving wife, the mother of his child, or he sides with his son, whom he is living, in theory, vicariously through, despite the fact Spike's already done a lot in his life. And Spike's moment of clarity is to respond to Daniel's plea for him wanting to experience things by saying, "That's important for building a good and strong character."
Bad parenting.
Daniel then kind of goes, "Please." And then Spike says, "If you want it that badly, I'll ask Fortress." Carly's reaction is just, "But darling!" And then Spike adds to this more by saying, "It's part of Daniel's upbringing." And then Daniel's like, "Thanks, Dad," and Carly ends the scene by going, "Oh no." And I'm just thinking, Spike, you are a goddamn awful parent.
Yeah. I mean, credit to Daniel for being that classic kid that knows exactly how to like play parents off against one another and press just the right buttons to get what he wants. It's like, I do not give Daniel much credit, but he says exactly the right thing for Spike to be like, yes, like this is what you need to grow as a person. And it's like, well, you made a terrible decision, but fair play to Daniel for like somehow like pulling that one around.
Now, having got through that parenting montage, if you will, we should probably just create a supercut, Andy, of us talking about all the time Spike's been a bad parent on this show.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just the podcast, to be fair.
Fair. Absolutely fair.
No cuts required.
So, excluding, like, flashbacks that we've seen of Planet Master and such from earlier in the series, we are now visiting Planet Master for the first time, in real time, if you will.
Boy, is it a disappointment. Like, I mean, I was kind of hyped for like, oh, what kind of like impressive visuals will we have for this planet that is, you know, the home of a lot of these characters and, you know, the centerpiece of so much of what's happened. It's just like, oh, it's just flat desert. It's like, oh, okay, well, now I can see why maybe they all just wanted to go and like be Transformers and stuff.
There's me thinking we've had, like, Planet Beehive. We've had, like, the two planets that split off because one was about to implode or whatnot. We've had that other planet that was linked to a pirate ship. What wonders could we have on this planet? And I look at it and just think, where's the first ravine?
Yeah. I mean, we don't even really get much in the way of ravines. It's just so flat, and it's like, I mean, again, to be fair, given how good the animation of a lot of the rest of this episode is, if you're gonna cut corners anywhere, then yeah, sure, like, let's not go crazy on the backgrounds and let's not make this planet too exciting. But like, man, was it just like unspectacular. I was expecting a little bit of kind of, I don't know, a little bit of flair to this, but there was none of that. So yeah, Planet Master, not high on my list of tourist attractions, it has to be said.
But now, to be fair, though I also really wanted Planet Master to look like, at least have a patch of grass somewhere. Earlier in the series, we did hear many stories from Autobots and Decepticons about how rough of an environment Planet Master was to survive in. So I understand why it's basically just, oh look, it's a not planet Earth.
Yeah,
in many ways.
Yeah, for sure. It's just like you can make an almost uninhabitable planet look more interesting than just like it's the desert. So you know, it's yeah, a bit of a disappointment, but I'll get over it.
The narrator says, meanwhile, Planet Master, the old home of the Headmasters, was under direct attack by Scorponok's Decepticon army. We then get to see the Horrorcons, the Predacons, the Terracons, and even Andy, and I never thought we were going to see them again, the frickin' Decepticon clones making an appearance to attack some kind of installation that's coming under heavy fire. We're getting the whole kit and caboodle here.
Yep, they're really swinging for the fences with this one.
At the same time all of this is happening on just around the planet, Sixshot informs Scorponok that Battleship Maximus will soon be on its way after undergoing repairs. Scorponok is less than concerned, to put it mildly, because we find out now that Slugslinger, Trigger Happy, and Misfire have also become Targetmasters. We discover that the 3 missing friends the refugees were mentioning on the Autobot side of things have actually now bonded to the risks of the 3 new Decepticons. Whether they are there willingly or not, we do not know at this point. But either way, Andy, it firmly establishes this is the origin of the Targetmasters in the Headmasters continuity.
Yeah. And again, this is where I guess maybe this is where I'm just wishing for a different series, but like if they were named and if they'd had a bit of backstory before this point, you could have had a lot of interesting kind of discussion points about, like, you know, whether they're there willingly, whether they would like to switch sides, etc., which again, I feel like there were some elements of this in like the G1 like comic continuity, points of just like some of either like Headmasters or Targetmasters or Power Masters or whatever who were actually like actively questioning their role in this thing and saying like, I don't know if I want to be on this side anymore, like I feel like I may have made the wrong choice, and sort of dehumanizing them somewhat sort of takes part of that away in a way which is kind of a bit of a shame because it feels like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, and the only kind of play on that we've had, though it's more just their character as a whole, has been Punch and Counterpunch. Of which, where's Punch in this?
Yeah, who knows? We're hanging out with Ironhide somewhere.
Your espionage is done, fly away! So now that we have seen that, Battleship Maximus is blasting off towards Planet Master. On board, the Headmasters, are speculating as to what's the reason for Scorponok's, sudden change of attention as to what planet he wants to conquer. But elsewhere on board, Point Blank is assuring Daniel and Wheelie that their battle-hardened strength and new Targetmaster partners will win the fight. This is where we get the first quote, Andy, of, "Don't worry, we're professional soldiers. We won't let the Decepticons take Planet Master." And based on what that TF Wiki note says, I get the feeling we're going to be hearing the phrase professional soldiers quite a bit for the remainder of this show.
Yep, it is our new ninja consultant is a professional soldier.
We should so make some faux business cards like that if we could. Great fun. Now, this is... As this is being said, that's what I'm trying to say. This is where we get our first proper noticeable moment, Andy, that the Target Masters have been separated from their buddies, as it were. Because the other two guys are just arm wrestling in the background. I don't know if you noticed this, but they're just arm wrestling on screen while this conversation's happening.
I mean, if there's one thing that I know from watching a lot of Hollywood movies, that's what professional soldiers do in their downtime. They just arm wrestle a lot. I mean, think of the number of movies you've seen where, like, that's... Especially, like, the classic, like, 80s action movie with any sort of, like, group of soldiers. At some point, two of them will arm wrestle. Like, it is absolutely, like... I believe you're not even allowed to call it a film unless that happens.
And the other thing that's really established as well in this scene is that the Target Master buddies can just transform and move freely as they see fit. Whether that happens on the Decepticon side of things, we don't know, and who knows if that will actually ever be touched on in any great detail, but I sort of wanted to note it now for a continuity sake, if you will. During the scene as well, Point Blank also takes time to throw another jab in the direction of the Headmasters, accusing them of having short tempers and, quite frankly, just a lack of experience in battle.
I mean,
The Headmasters...
He's not wrong, though, is he? Like, they have been kind of short-tempered and not particularly good in battle at times, so, you know. But then again,
Yeah.
they did off Galvatron, so, I mean, you know, swings and roundabouts.
Yeah, and how many times has Chrome Dome let down the planet Earth?
Well, yeah, I mean, there is that.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're not wrong, but you kind of think there's a politer way to phrase that, but then you got to remember they're professional soldiers, and you've also got to remember it's a kid's show. We've not said that once this episode yet. The Headmasters are just sort of brushing off these insults and just walking away, but once they're sort of off to one side alone, they're grumbling about the Target Master's sort of arrogance in general, which prompts Daniel and Wheelie to have a moment where they're like, it's a bit tense here, isn't it? So clearly, this is going to play a part in something. Back on Planet Master, the Decepticon Target Masters enter the ongoing battle just to take out the local sort of bases and facilities and such. But what they do is they basically do what the Decepticon Headmasters couldn't do, and that's take out a base pretty quickly, because they utilize their jet forms, which confuses the Headmasters, because they're like, are they our friends, or do we know who they are? Like, who are they? Like, we don't know any jets. They probably would have said under their breath, that's like a season 2 thing, like, we don't know them. Before our time. But at this moment, Battleship Maximus appears, and the Autobot Headmasters and Target Masters leap into the fray, beating back the Decepticon Headmasters and the Horrorcons. In our slapstick moment of the episode, it actually involves Skullcruncher, who just basically gets run over, literally flattened into the sand by Hardhead simply driving over him. Have fun with that if you want to look that up on the episode, folks. As for the Target Master's performance in battle, sans that flashback that we saw in part 1, we haven't really seen too much of them in action, as it were, and this is our first proper good look at them fighting. And Andy, not just fighting, they're in vehicle mode. And to say they had a really good battle against the Decepticons is a bit of an understatement, because they utterly trounced the Decepticons, and this is not something we have seen happen very often in this Headmasters show at all. So I was quite taken aback, especially in vehicle mode, just how overwhelmed the Decepticons were in this little battle.
Yeah. And again, if this is like the classic Transformers, we can look forward to in a couple of weeks them looking completely powerless and useless when they need to big up another character.
So now, at this point, because things aren't going too well, the Scorponok base, if you will, decides to bury itself in the desert, which I did have a great hearty chuckle at. And we're now introduced to the surviving Planet Master warriors, who are friendlies, it should be said, as the Autobots are celebrating their little win here. There's a quick reuniting with various comrades who we've never seen before, but it's clear that the Autobots know them, and clearly it's been a while since they've all had a chance to hang out. But Chrome Dome in particular spots one familiar face sort of picking his way out of a bunch of rubble, which, should note, there was a small quick transition scene where a base got totally mullered by the Decepticons, where this master survivor, I'll just call it that, he basically got buried underneath a building, but he's now miraculously managed to get himself out. This turns out to be an old friend of Chrome Dome, Now, on the list of names that we could have had, Andy, as to what this guy's name would be, we've got the likes of Slugslinger as a Decepticon. We've got Chrome Dome as a headmaster. Heck, we simply just have Fortress as a name. I did not expect the name simply Jack to be a Transformers nickname.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, as we will come to learn, like he didn't make it through the headmaster selection process, and I suspect that he actually failed as soon as he put in his application form, and his name was just Jack. It's like, well, no one's gonna buy your toy. Like, you can't just be called Jack. Like, look at these guys. Look at Highbrow and Hardhead and Fortress. Like, no one's gonna be like, oh, I want Jack. Like, you know, even Wheelie. Like, at least he has, you know, Wheelie's kind of a cool name.
The only other Transformer that's had Jack in his name was Wheeljack, and he was cool.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that could have been the long tale of like having like Wheelie become a headmaster, and who would be called Wheeljack, and then it would be like, oh. But thankfully they didn't do that.
Now, Chrome Dome attempts to speak to Jack, but Jack just walks by, kind of behaving like he doesn't know who Chrome Dome is, which, quite frankly, makes Chrome Dome look to be like an utter arse, quite frankly.
Yeah.
He's like, it's one of those very awkward moments of, Jack, what are you doing?
And to be fair, he looks even more of an ass given what happens next. So it's just like, maybe this is not the time for chit chat, as it turns out.
Yeah, so it should be said that the reason Jack doesn't say anything is because he's kind of in a bit of a daze, and then just collapses due to probably, you know, being buried under rubble for a while and no one being able to help him. So we then get back on board Battleship Maximus. He's been tended to by RC. Chrome Dome enters, but Jack still doesn't seem to recognise him. And despite Chrome Dome saying that they used to be friends back in the day before he became a headmaster, still not ringing any bells, seemingly. Daniel then suggests, not by really saying anything, but kind of doing the, why don't you know, do the thing. Basically implying, don't be a giant Transformer, be a little one. Be like your headmaster, be your headed version of your headmaster form, if you will. So he goes into his small robot mode, thinking that, you know, that might jog a few screws, as it were. And Chrome Dome does. And then Jack just gets up and leaves, prompting Wheelie just to simply say, what a weirdo.
Takes one to know one, Wheelie. Takes one to know one.
And then RC as well, without missing a beat, just saying, don't say that.
Yeah. I feel like RC is actually, like, probably, like, you know, the best, like, bless Carly for trying, but at least RC is, like, on hand to be, like, surrogate mum in these things. It'd be like, no, you can't say that to someone. Stop it.
I mean, to be fair, Carly's outnumbered 2-1, you know.
I mean, yeah. Carly has a lot to put up with.
So Chrome Dome catches up to his friend, and they discuss their past. And not to regale the entire conversation, but to summarise, it becomes clear that Jack is envious of Chrome Dome's strength and is still sad, having basically just utterly failed the headmaster training program, which... that's a thing, Andy, we've come to learn. There was a training program. They weren't just, you know, oh, you're a headmaster.
Well, and more to the point, we get to see it, and I'm just going to say right here, I think it's a headmaster's torture program, because it seemed like it basically just involves, like, attaching people to a kind of centrifuge and just spinning them around incredibly fast for a very long time. And it kind of looks terrible. And like, I mean, basically, Jack just, like, spins off this thing and, like, falls to the ground, and it's like... I'm not I think I would just say, you know what? I think I'm fine not being a headmaster. Like, I think I'm not really sure. Like, you know, what purpose does this serve? Like, because even compared to like your typical like NASA training video of like, oh, here's the G forces that you have to endure. This seemed like a level up from that, and like I don't know, like that did not seem like a good training program to me. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah, and Jack even implies in his dialogue, I'm pretty sure, that, like, this is how you learn how to, like, transform into head-on mode. And I'm like, what? How does this help?
Yeah, a whole, like, heap of kids at this point, like, ramming all their Transformers in their mum's washing machine. To be like, no, it's how they become headmasters.
But now, this is where you can give a little pat on the back to Chrome Dome, because... he basically tells Jack, What are you talking about? You're envious of my strength. You've got a great scientific mind that's just as important. We later learn, Andy, he actually helped build Fortress Maximus, so he's pretty bloody important.
Yeah.
Go on, sorry.
And so it's sort of I do quite like this as a sort of an interesting kind of schism between these two characters of like them both sort of being jealous of one another in very specific ways. There's a nice bit of like humanity to this, of just like, you know, you can sort of look at somebody and be like, oh man, like I wish I had whatever trait it is you have, or like I wish I had your job, and be completely blinkered to the fact that they're sitting there being like, no, man, I wish I had your job, or whatever it is. And it's like, yeah, this is kind of a nice little human moment in this sort of, you know, big robot series.
And then Chrome Dome gives, you know, the friendly little pat on the back that Jack needs to make sure he's back into shape by simply going, I don't think I'm more evolved than you just because I'm a headmaster. If you doubt yourself again, I'll give you a good kicking.
But can you do telepathy though, Jack? Can you? Because I know telepathy.
I can do telepathy. So the friends embrace, and then sort of point blank is sort of nearby and just kind of says under his breath, he's soft. But nearby, we come to find out that Sixshot has been paying attention to this conversation between the two friends and has a plan to exploit said friendship. So we get a little moment where Chrome Dome and Jack have clearly been talking, but Chrome Dome's got to go to like a meeting of some kind. And he sort of walks away from Jack, says, I'll catch up with you later. Jack turns around to walk back, but then suddenly Chrome Dome is back behind him. Except it's not Chrome Dome, because in a scene a little bit, like a few moments earlier, we see that Sixshot has used his just ninja calling card, quite frankly, to effectively disguise his appearance and pose as Chrome Dome, and proceeds just to knock him out by punching him in his Transformers gut, which I guess is also a thing that applies in robots, Andy. I don't know. And then carries him back to the Decepticon base, Scorponok, and he wants to get some information out of him, but, you know, not just a little interrogation, Andy. It's a full-blown flipping torture scene with, like, whips and stuff, and I just thought, Jesus Christ, this is a kid's cartoon.
Yeah, this was definitely my moment of just like, yeah, this is a kid's show. And yeah, it's not even that kind of like, I feel like, you know, cartoons of the 80s, like, you know, He-Man, etc. Like, I remember characters getting whipped and stuff as like torture in that, but it was, I don't know, this felt a little bit more vicious and a little bit more violent than I remember those shows being. And yeah, and it's like, I mean, Jack's just like, this is nothing compared to Headmasters training. Like, as long as you're not going to strap me to a centrifuge, like, I'm fine. I'm not going to talk.
Exactly. And the reason that they have kidnapped him is because they clearly know he had involvement in building Fortress Maximus. So they want to know the secret of the Master Sword, more specifically what it's made out of. But Jack doesn't know. And even Mindwipe's hypnotic powers reveal that he literally doesn't know. He just knows it's made from a quote-unquote hard metal that only Fortress knows.
Yeah, I really, that was my most enjoyable part of this episode. Like, what's the Master Sword made? I was like, metal. And I'm like, fair play. Like, that's a very good nondescript answer. But then, yeah, it turns out that's literally all he knows. I'm just like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I was just given it. I don't ask questions.
So, because they can't learn anything more, you know, they could do the honourable thing, you know, just let the prisoner go, let him run back. Yeah, hell, they could just kill him, quite frankly, because, you know, that's what enemies do. But no, Andy. Sixshot reaches perhaps a new level of depravity, even for the Ninja Consultant standards. He just basically says, how about we put a bomb inside him and make him blow up Maximus? So that's what happens.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, talk about going from, like, Ninja Consultant to Islamic State Consultant within, like, within a breath. Because I was all here ready to kind of, like, give Sixshot some praise for, like, good ninjaing. Like, you know, that was a good bit of disguising and, you know, managed to stealthily take this subject away for questioning. And then it's just like, yeah, we've gone straight for the almost literal nuclear option here of like, let's put a bomb in this guy. And it's like, oh, Again, this is a kid's cartoon. Like, I'm not sure you can do that.
And the narrator adds to this even more alongside some like little montage we see by saying, a time bomb is installed in Jack. Then Mindwipe hypnotizes him to board Battleship Maximus. It's just like, flipping heck. All right, we're going dark now. We're clearly getting really into the series now. You know, we've got to that point in the show.
And at least if they know one thing, it's that the Headmasters will have no idea what the countdown on the timer is for the bomb, even if it's just literally says it on the bomb. So, you know, that's also a benefit.
So discovering that Jack has been kidnapped, the Autobots have already figured out that the reason is because they want to find out what the Master Sword is made of. Like, they've already figured that element of this entire plan out. But just as they're about to go and rescue him, Jack appears on the horizon. Daniel notices him. And he's marching towards Battleship Maximus. And Chrome Dome's about to sort of try and run out and go, Jack, you're okay! But then Point Blank jumps in front and goes, wait a second. Twincast, scan him. Does so, and Twincast detects that there is a bomb. And Chrome Dome tries to convince his friend to stop. But Jack has a laser, which Chrome Dome's reaction was priceless, because it was literally, they even equipped him with weapons. Like, what the heck is going on? And Point Blank is simply in favour of just, you know what, eliminate him. Let's just be done with this. It's a big threat. Let's just get it done. If they're going to blow up Maximus, we can't let that happen. And then the phrase "target on" is said by Point Blank. And we see the refugee, the buddy, that's the correct term I've said now, then turns into sort of the cannon element that will become the arm cannon on Point Blank's wrist. And the way I sort of tried to note it down, Andy, was if you've not seen what that looks like, I think maybe kind of like what Shockwave occasionally had back in the day. Sort of something akin to that, except it's actually like literally a transformable add-on, if you will.
Yeah, pretty much.
Then, Point Blank's about to do the deed. Highbrow's trying to stop him. But Point Blank is just saying, you know, this is the nature of war. We just got to do what we got to do and such. But then Chrome Dome steps up and says, no, I'll do this. And he's hesitating. And Jack is getting closer and closer to Maximus. Point Blank calls him out saying, like, why aren't you doing anything? Then Chrome Dome leaps into the air, jumps in the path of his friend. Jack just starts shooting lasers at him. Is not responding or anything. He's just clearly been hypnotized. Is shooting these little pew-pew lasers from his fingers, quite frankly. And then Chrome Dome just shouts, "Forgive me," and shoots him point blank in the chest. No pun intended. And he's literally just shot his friend through the chest. Not just through the chest. Jack collapses. And with his last words, he suddenly come to out of the hypnosis, excuse me. And he simply says, "The Decepticons know the secret of the Master Sword." Boom! The bomb goes off. And Jack has now left a crater in the ground. And the Decepticons are immediately on standby to take advantage of this. It's the Decepticon Headmasters and Sixshot. And earlier in the season, Andy, I can't remember exactly when it was, but there was a moment, it may have been after, like, when Ultra Magnus was dying, it might have been around that time, when the Autobots were just notably angry when fighting. It was a much more vicious side of the Autobots we'd not seen before. We basically get that with all the Headmasters, the Targetmasters, and especially Chrome Dome. Chrome Dome engages one-on-one with Sixshot, and as he's getting towards the Decepticon, he says to himself, quote unquote, "My friend Abel was killed by Sixshot, and now Jack too. I can't forgive that." An insert song begins, so we know something big is about to happen once again. Chrome Dome gets to Sixshot, turns by his side, and just blows Sixshot's arms clean off. There's no sugarcoating this. Sixshot's arms are blown the hell off, Andy.
Yep, Ninja consult that.
And the three new Decepticons are now revealed to the Autobots to be Targetmasters as well. it being confirmed officially through dialogue that the other refugees have joined the Decepticons, and that the Autobot buddies are really upset by this. But what we also see, Andy, which I assume is going to play into the show later on, is the Decepticon Targetmasters fire some lasers. The Autobot Targetmasters fire lasers. They meet in the middle, and they defuse each other. So it implies they are of the same power level, so that's probably going to play into something down the line, I imagine. And then we get a few little bits of dialogue, which is Slugslinger saying, "Point blank, you're all going to hell." And then Point Blank simply responding with, "I look forward to meeting you there." Good comeback. The villains retreat, and Chrome Dome is all set to pursue them. He's almost in a blind rage, but Point Blank holds him back. And Chrome Dome, just filled with anger over the fact he had to take his own friend's life because of what Six Shot had done. We then get a little scene between him, that being Chrome Dome, and Point Blank, where he says to Chrome Dome, "Save your anger for the next battle." And Chrome Dome has a moment and then turns around and says, "I don't like you, but I do recognize your power." Point Blank responds with, "You're not too bad yourself." The two shake hands. And then Chrome Dome says, "We'll work together in the future." And then it turns out Daniel and Wheelie are randomly hiding on top of one of the Maximus giant cannons hanging above, and basically goes, "Bet you can't catch us, Chrome Dome!" At which point they're rapidly then caught, because where do you go if you're at the edge of a cannon? You can't exactly go anywhere else. But then Fortress approaches Point Blank and says to him, Fortress approaches Point Blank, and then Point Blank says, "He'll make a good warrior." And then Fortress says back to Point Blank, "Keep giving him support." And the narrator concludes the episode as we see Daniel and Wheelie failing to escape the clutches of Chrome Dome on top of this cannon. With the arrival of the Targetmasters, the struggle for Planet Master has intensified. Chrome Dome will overcome the pain of his friend's death and fight on. And then we get the cheery ending music.
Yeah, and with sort of a freeze frame that looks as if they're all about to fall off the top of Fortress Maximus. It sort of felt like the freeze frame in a health and safety video about not climbing on giant robots. Just like, you can imagine what happens next.
And that is the end of part 2 of that story. And Andy, again, another great episode. And in terms of wrapping up the story that was established in part 1, a heck of a lot of stuff occurs. Again, really, really liked this. As a 2-parter, this was freaking great. Introducing a lot of things, a lot of really interesting things, a lot of planting the seeds for things that might play up later. But above all else, was just really great fun to watch, despite the quite, in places, really dark subject matter.
Yeah, oh boy, like as endings go. I mean, again, I said, going back to Planet Master as kind of a centerpiece for this raised the stakes. I wasn't expecting the stakes to get quite so personal. And again, kids show, but we've had, torture, suicide bomber, and then, Chrome Dome who already beating himself up over the death of Ultra Magnus now has to kill his own best friend, basically. And it's like, okay, that's a lot, but it's played really well. It's, you could easily show that to kind of an older audience and it would still, it has a bit of punch to it. And yeah, it's kind of, again, one of the nice things about this series, and the fact that kids show or not, it does go in some more mature directions, and it does tend to handle them pretty well. And this is definitely another one of those that, it manages to do that, and also has some cool action scenes where it's like, yeah, I want to buy these toys at the same time.
So I guess before we head on to the TF Wiki, any other notes you've got on the episode you want to impart on, folks? Anything random that you noticed? Were there any other random old school G1 people lurking about?
No, not that I know of. I would say I did like the whole Scorponok hiding in the sand and doing a scorpion thing. That felt like a nice little moment of just again, you thought this through. You've thought about these characters and their robot forms in natural ways.
So then let's head to the TF Wiki. First of all, for a continuity note, Jack's death in this episode further amplifies the grudge that Chrome Dome holds against Sixshot. It also notes here, previously established in the episodes I Risk My Life for Earth, and then begun by the deaths of Abel in Terror the Six Shadows. That was ages ago, flipping heck. And then Ultra Magnus in the episode Ultra Magnus Dies. A few animation and technical errors that might be of note here. When Chrome Dome says, right, Jack, after explaining to Daniel that he and Jack are friends, there are 2 Chrome Domes on screen.
I mean, but maybe one of them was Sixshot in disguise.
No. Here's an interesting one. Dotted throughout this episode are robots drawn based on the animation models of several of the Autobot Master Warriors, which I'm not familiar with what that means, so let me quickly look that up. The Autobot Master Warriors are a group of young Cybertronians living on planet Master, training to become fully fledged headmasters. Apparently, this team includes the names, Andy, which I'm guessing this is like all the Master survivors that I mentioned earlier. And apparently their names are Kirk, Rodney, Loafer, Leone, Toriza, and Shuffler.
I'm sorry, but you can't call anybody Rodney and expect them to be treated seriously in this
only Fools and Horses gag at this point, isn't it?
Yeah, this is where I'm hoping that like the next TF Wiki note was like, actually, there's a little lane crossover between Transformers and Only Fools and Horses.
An Optimus Prime figure can be seen in season. So, additional note to this, the colorations of these characters, however, are way off the actual colours of the toys. So it's not entirely clear whether or not these are supposed to be the characters in question, or whether they're just randos. And then sort of see their own articles for more details. So if you want to know more about those respective characters, folks, head over to the TF Wiki and look up the Autobot Master Warriors hub page. Trivia notes. The Japanese take on the Targetmasters is slightly different than the American approach, but not as much as their take on the Headmasters. Here, rather than having small robots transform into guns that the larger robots hold, the larger robots' fists retract and guns plug into their wrists in a process known as Target On. The Targetmasters' guns' electronic beeping as dialogue and penchant for sitting on their larger partner's shoulders would, many years later, show up again in the behaviour of the mini-cons in the Armada cartoon series. There's a little detail there. It also notes here, it's kind of tragic that 6 Master refugees were fleeing from Slugslinger and co., but 3 of them wound up being bonded to their pursuers.
Yeah. I mean, again, there's the dark part of the episode that doesn't even get tackled of just like what's going on with those guys.
We haven't had this in a while, Andy, but toys inspired by this episode. So, Jack is included as a... Oh, this is a phrase. In a Legend Great Shots Headmaster. I'm unfamiliar what this line is, but sure. While Legend's Six-Shot Headmaster is a new mold... decoed like a miniature Six-Shot, Jack is a retool of Titan's Return Revolver. And then it says Titan Return Six-Shot's Titan Master. I'm not gonna lie, Andy, there were a lot of words in there. For the benefit of the video version, I will add this to like the video on screen. We may post this as well when it comes to Twitter and Instagram and such, but otherwise, if you head over to the episode page on the TF Wiki for this episode, you'll be able to see the image in question, hopefully be able to decipher what I could not just then.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of words. I will pretend that I comprehended some of them.
Cool. Foreign localization. So, first of all, I'm going to jump down to Spanish because this episode was apparently, I'm going to butcher this again, I apologize, I never learned Spanish, Era mi mejor amigo, which translates as, he was my best friend.
Okay. I thought this was just going to be Argentina.
I mean, in brackets after, it does just say America.
Okay. Well,
so I don't know anymore.
I'm glad
basically.
to get home. Maybe that's the whole thing. Maybe Jack represents America in this story, and it's this whole like allegory for something.
In Mandarin, it was Brave Warriors Come, Targetmasters Part 2. Italian carried on their amazing naming for this of Soldiers of Apocalypse, Targetmasters Part 2. When it comes to English, the Shout Factory subtitle once again was The Miracle Warriors, The Targetmasters Part 2, and the word pit shows up again instead of hell. Now, there's a couple of notes here relating to Omni Productions. First of all, episode was called The Miracle Warriors Part 2. Then it says, the Headmasters figure that the Decepticons are simply after the metal battleship Maximus is after, rather than anything to do with the Master Sword. So the Headmasters figure that the Decepticons are simply after the metal battleship Maximus is after.
I think that must mean that Maximus is made of.
Yeah, that... Something's gone wrong there, but okay. Sorry, TF Wiki, just reading it like it is. Rather than using his last words to pass on the information that the Decepticons know about the Master Sword, Jack apologizes to Chrome Dome in the Omni Productions dub.
I mean, fair. I mean, that seems like a... I was gonna say I'm curious to know how they write around that in future episodes, but as Omni Productions they probably just don't, because it's like that's a pivotal, like, you know, much like kind of finding out Scorponok's weakness. That is a point that is clearly gonna hang heavy over the episodes to come.
Indeed. So that concludes that episode, Andy. I know I sort of mentioned it in passing a few moments ago, but anything else based on what we've just read you wanted to touch on, or any other notes that were sprung to mind, or any other randomness that you noticed?
No. I mean, I'm just kind of a little shocked and kind of come to terms with the fact that we are barreling towards the end of this series now. Like, we've got, what, like 7 episodes to go?
Oh, bear with me. There are a total of 38.
Yeah, so 10 episodes to go. 9 episodes.
Yeah. We're getting close, mate. It's kind of amazing, actually, in many ways. And speaking of next episodes, next time on the podcast, folks, which should be available in a couple of weeks from the time of publishing, all going well. Apologies in advance if our recording schedule goes out of whack again like it has done in recent times. But we will be covering episodes 29 and 30 of the series, which, per the TF Wiki, have the following episode titles. Episode 29, The Master Sword is in Danger.
I mean, yes, we had at least gathered that much from this episode.
And then episode 30, which I'm going to rename slightly because of the Zarak Scorponok thing, The Scorponok Shield Turns the Tide.
Okay.
Intriguing. I don't know what that means entirely. But...
I mean, I feel like I can project in my mind what that might mean, and it's kind of interesting. But yeah, let's see what happens.
Now, well, there we go. Well, good sir. Before we wrap up good and proper, anything else you would like to impart on our wonderful audience?
Do you think Daniel saw Chrome Dome shoot his best friend dead? Do you think that? I mean,
him and Wheelie were crying like in RC's. Like, just in RC, as it were.
Yeah.
Quite frankly.
Yeah. So, I mean, he got something. He got the experiences that he wanted, I guess. But, like, yet again, he's seen a terrible thing happen right in front of his eyes.
And this comes back to the fact that Spike is a crap dad.
Yeah. I mean, once again, Carly was right. But I mean, once again, like the therapy bill for Daniel later in life is gonna, you know, I hope the Autobots are paying for like all of his like mental rehabilitation, because boy is he gonna need it after this series.
I mean, at this point, just kidnap Mindwipe and get him to wipe Daniel's brain of all the trauma.
I mean, yes, yeah. You had a happy childhood, just playing with your friends. Nothing terrible ever happened.
That said, they've got telepathy. They can do stuff.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Maybe, I was going to say maybe teach Daniel telepathy. No, definitely don't teach Daniel telepathy. That would be a terrible thing to happen.
See, that's the big twist we don't see coming in this show, isn't it?
Or just says, Daniel establishes a telepathic link with Zarak, and that's how he's defeated. It's like, I can't deal with this. That's all the time. Like, I give up. I'm going to the outer reaches of the universe because it's the only way I can make it stop.
It's like that. Do you remember before Avengers Endgame came out, there were all those theories going around online of people thinking Ant-Man's going to be the key to the story. Like, he's going to go up like Thanos' bum and just just enlarge from inside his rectum and stuff.
This is the Headmasters version of that. Is like just Daniel's going to like have a telepathic link to Zarak.
Oh my word. Well, folks, like I say, our next episode should be available in a few weeks' time from the date of publishing, so stay tuned for that. And if you haven't already, check out the archives. We've gone through all of American G1. We've gone through all of Headmasters to date so far. We've got a few bonus episodes, if I can say that properly, on the YouTube channel as well, which you can find at youtube.com/Starscream's Ghost Podcast. We're getting some clips up on there as well. I've sort of been going through past episodes and such, kind of cherry picking a few little segments here and there. So if you want to check out those, you can do so as well. And if you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend? We would really appreciate it. If you want to find our social media accounts, which, full disclaimer, folks, I appreciate there's not been much posting on there because I thought automated posts were going to go out, and apparently they didn't. So that's why it's been really dormant. That's what happens when I go away for a few weeks on holiday and such. But there you go. But if you want to find those, we are under the names Starscream's Pod on both Instagram and Twitter. Assuming at this point Twitter still exists, because who knows at this point, quite frankly. But good sir, thank you very much for joining me once again on this intrepid journey, and I look forward to discussing episodes 29 and 30 very soon.
Yes, very excited. And yeah, we'll be back soon. So until then, bye everyone.
Take care everyone. Have a nice day.